34 years ago, Honda decided to embark upon the journey of selling sort of fancy cars in the good old US of A. They called that business Acura. I have no idea where they got that name. 4 years after that, Toyota and Nissan joined the party with much fancier cars, but equally odd names, Lexus and Infiniti. Mazda was going to join the party, but they thought better of it. However, let's go back to '86, and there was another car company that began selling cars in the good old US of A, but not fancy cars. No, they went for the most affordable car in the US in 1986. Well, they had some ups, and they had some really long downs, and it took them a while for them to work out their product quality, designs, and the way the cars drove. But by 2008, they too decided to start selling very fancy cars in the US. However, no separate division and no oddball name. Then 2016 rolled around, came up with a separate division, but if you're a Star Trek fan, a pretty good name. But for the past 4 years, Genesis has only sold cars. Today, that changes. And like every other fancy car manufacturer around the world, hell, like any car manufacturer around the world, Genesis is now going to be making SUVs. This one for the 2021 model year, it is called the Genesis GV80. It's based on the G80 platform, and we were very fortunate to get an early access to a pre-production prototype. So you and I are going to do a tech review on the 2021 Genesis GV80. So if you saw the 2021 G80 tech review, this will all sound very familiar to you. Two engines on offer, a 2.5 turbocharged four-cylinder engine and a 3.5 twin turbocharged V6 engine. What I can't tell you is the exact power output figures. Genesis hasn't released that for the GV80. To give you an idea of guidance in the G80, which is a sedan, not an SUV, the four-cylinder is 300 horsepower and 311 pounds of torque. This engine, the twin-turbo V6, is 375 horsepower and 391 pounds of torque. I would expect the torque to change in both, considering what this is meant to do. Not surprisingly, the GV80 shares a lot of hardware with the G80 sedan, which translates to double wishbones in the front, multi-link in the rear. And one thing I forgot to mention in the tech review of the G80 sedan, when I was crawling around underneath both of these cars, I did notice anti-roll bars front and rear. Then there are the wheels. Being this is an SUV, the most basic is a 19-inch wheel, so that's 1 inch larger than the G80 sedan. Then there's a 20-inch wheel on offer, which was the biggest on the G80 sedan. This one is the fancy Prestige model, so it has the biggest wheels, 22 inches. Then there are the brakes. Same change as in the G80 sedan. When the fancy Prestige is spec'd, it changes the caliper in the front. But in addition to that, the front brakes are larger in diameter in the Prestige spec. Not entirely surprised the inside of a GV80 doesn't look a whole hell of a lot different from the inside of a G80, which is to say a good thing, because we learned two things. Number one, the designers, they did a hell of a job, but more importantly, the color and trim people, they knocked it out of the park. And here is really the same thing. The only thing that changes is the center console. The angle changes a bit, and it looks a little bit wider. I guess they have more real estate in an SUV. The only thing I would ask for a change, the steering wheel, do not love the design. That said, there are 3 tech items that we need to cover that apply to both the GV80 and the G80. The first is something we've seen before in the Hyundai Sonata, an NFC key. It can be either like a credit card that goes into your wallet, or you can provision your smartphone to be an NFC key. However, there's one major asterisk there, currently only Android. And the reason why, Apple, unsurprisingly, does not allow developers access to the NFC chip. So until that changes, no iPhones. Number 2, the seat I am sitting in is called an ergo seat. I'm gathering short for ergonomic. And it's kind of reminiscent of the orthopedic seats of Mercedes from like the late 70s into the early 80s, where you had these different air chambers that would fill pneumatically. And the idea was to keep you alert. That is the exact same thing here. They have 7 different air chambers. And then there's the cruise control system. Not surprisingly, it's an adaptive cruise system. However, what's new is there's some machine learning there. And what it does, it gets to know your driving style. Whether you drive very fast, whether you hit the brakes all the time, or whether you're just a slowpoke. And I gotta be honest with you, I don't know if I would want a connected computer to know that information about me and then adapt to my style of driving. Because that's what the system does. Anyway, would you want that? Comments below. You and I already spent a lot of time talking about design as it pertains to the G80, and most of that applies here. The only carve-out specific to the GV80 is the grille. And I don't want to sound pornographic again, but this one is less sensual than the one that's on the G80 because there's not as many curves, and specifically, it doesn't drop down as much as on the G90 and the G80. Here, it suits this design a bit better, but once again, I'm gonna turn this around to you guys. What do you like about this design? What do you not like about this design, and why? Let me know in the comments below. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna share that with the folks who designed this thing, which they were about, 50 miles from here, and hopefully we can have some of them on a coming episode of Inside the MOTOMAN Studio. Unlike the G80, the GV80 is very similar in wheelbase to other cars that would be along the same lines. Think BMW X5, Volvo XC90. Those are both about an inch longer in wheelbase than this. The only other one that's very different, and I would still consider it along the same lines because of money mainly, that one is 7 inches shorter in wheelbase. That's the Lexus RX. Then in terms of usability, yes, there is a third row here. In the two lower models, it's a manual release. In this very fancy Prestige model, it's an electric fold. So it's kind of slow, but it is a button back there. And somewhat along the same lines. Remember the sunshade for the side window on the G80? That was manual in a fancy luxury car. This is an SUV, meant as a baby buggy for families, and this one is electric. I don't understand. However, there is something I do understand. Remember the trick with the floor of the trunk in the G80 where it could literally be clipped onto the top so it doesn't like fall on your head when you're trying to pull the spare tire out? There is a version of that for this. The cargo cover, which is not new to SUVs, that can be taken out and put over the back for privacy when the back seats are folded down. However, in pretty much every SUV I have ever driven, you got to pull that out and leave it in the garage. There is a place to store it underneath the cargo floor and bring it with you. On behalf of all OCD people around the world, thank you. No, it is not time to play our favorite game, the options game, because it's simply too early to play the options game. We just don't have all the information. However, I do have some preliminary figures for you. A 4-cylinder, 2-wheel drive GV80, about 49,000 US. The step up to all-wheel drive and 4-cylinder, it's kind of a big jump. It's about 6,000 US at $55,000. Then the V6, that introduces a couple of things. Obviously more money, that starts at $59,000, but all V6s are all-wheel drive. Now the car you are looking at here, it is the fanciest one on offer. It is the Prestige. This one is about 71,000 US. And just a note here, a switch to a V6 is not just more power. It is unlike the Porsche world where the V6 comes with a lot more stuff. It's a car that frankly is just better equipped and probably more competitive than other vehicles out there. With that, it has been lovely with having 2 pre-production prototypes here from Korea, but now back to driving cars. So until I see you in the next episode, bis später.